German businessman wasn't understood by anyone until the cleaning lady approached, and Richard Thompson was completely lost on his first day as the new owner of the American company he had just acquired. He tried to communicate with the employees by mixing German, English, and a few poorly pronounced words in English, but everyone backed away from him with strange, uncomfortable looks. It was when he tried to greet the receptionist in the morning that he realized something was very wrong. The young woman simply waved nervously and ran off to another department, leaving him alone in the entrance hall. Throughout that first week, the same scene repeated with nearly every employee at the tech company located in downtown New York City. The 42-year-old businessman, with his brown hair slicked back and always impeccably dressed in his dark suits, couldn't understand why his arrival caused so much discomfort. He had bought the company with the best intentions, planning to expand it and create new job opportunities, but it seemed no one even wanted to look his way. During meetings, when he tried to explain his plans in broken English, the employees would just nod politely and whisper among themselves. Richard started working late, hoping that perhaps in a quieter setting he could establish some connection with his team. But even then, when he crossed paths with someone in the hallways, they would avert their eyes and quicken their pace. The evenings at the company became his refuge. Richard sat alone in his office, staring at an old photograph he always carried with him, speaking in German to the faded image. It was in these moments he felt most vulnerable, questioning whether he had made the right decision, leaving his life in Germany to come to the United States. It was on one of these lonely nights that he heard footsteps in the hallway. He quickly tucked the photo into a drawer, trying to regain his professional composure. A woman appeared at his office door, pushing a cleaning cart. She was around 50, with dark hair tied in a ponytail, wearing the blue and white uniform of the cleaning company. "Sorry to bother you, doctor," she said softly. "Should I clean here now, or would you prefer I come back later?" Richard gestured for her to come in, but when he tried to respond in English, the words came out all jumbled. He sighed, visibly frustrated, and muttered something in German without realizing. The woman stopped arranging her cleaning rags and looked at him curiously. "Are you all right?" she asked, stepping a little closer. "Ich verstehe nicht. I don't understand why everyone—" Richard mixed the languages again, running his hands through his hair in despair. Then, the cleaning lady did something entirely unexpected. She walked up to his desk and with a kind smile said in perfect German, "Vielleicht kann ich Ihnen helfen. Perhaps I can help you." Richard nearly fell out of his chair. His eyes widened, and he sat in silence for a few seconds, processing what he had just heard. You speak German?" he asked, still in disbelief. "Yes, sir. I learned while caring for a German lady for many years. Mrs. Margaret taught me not just the language, but many things about the culture too." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. For the first time since arriving in the United States, Richard felt genuine relief. Finally, someone he could communicate with properly. But his expression shifted when he realized the unusual situation. "What's your name?" he asked in German. "Dorothy Williams, sir. I've worked here cleaning for 15 years. Dorothy, I need to understand something. Why are all the employees avoiding me? Is it just because of the language?" Dorothy hesitated for a moment, glancing around to make sure they were alone. "Can I be honest with you, sir?" Richard nodded, bracing himself to hear something he might not want to know. "The employees aren't avoiding you just because of the language. They're scared." "Scared? Scared of what?" "They believe you came here to fire half the company and shut down some departments." Richard was stunned. That information was completely opposite to his actual plans. "But that's absurd. I came to expand the company, hire more people, invest in technology. I know it might sound strange, sir, but that's what everyone believes. And there's something else you should know." Dorothy stepped even closer, lowering her voice. "The one spreading these rumors was Dr. Michael Jenkins, the former director who was let go before you arrived." Richard vaguely remembered the name. During the acquisition negotiations, he'd uncovered some irregularities in the financial reports that led to the dismissal of several executives, including this Michael. "He's spreading lies about me? Worse than that, sir. He created a group on the messaging app with several employees and has been sending false information about your intentions. He even showed documents that looked official, claiming the headquarters in Germany ordered drastic cuts. Richard felt a mix of anger and despair. He was being sabotaged before even getting a chance to show his true intentions. Dorothy, can you show me these conversations? Yes, sir. My daughter works in the finance department and showed me some screenshots. She's also worried about her job. Dorothy took out her phone and showed the messages she'd received from her daughter. Richard read with growing indignation the lies being spread about him. There were fake documents, supposed orders from the German headquarters, and even rumors about his personality, painting him as a cold and calculating businessman. This explains a lot, Richard murmured. But how can I prove it's all lies? It won't be easy, sir. Dr. Michael still has a lot of connections here. Some people trust him because he worked here for 15 years. Richard ran his hands over his face, feeling the weight of the situation. His first week in the United States was turning into a disaster, and he hadn't even realized he was the victim of a sabotage campaign. Dorothy, can I trust you? Of course, sir. I always knew something was off with the accounts when Dr. Michael was still here. He was very secretive about certain reports. How so? I worked the overnight shift, right? Sometimes I'd see him coming in very early or staying late, always fiddling with papers he kept in a separate folder. Once I saw him printing documents on a different printer, one that wasn't connected to the company's system. Richard leaned forward, intrigued. Do you think he was doing something shady? Sir, I don't have a college degree, but I've worked my whole life, and I can tell when someone's hiding something. Dr. Michael was always polite to me, but I could see he got nervous when I showed up in his office to clean. And you never saw anything concrete? Once, I found some papers that had fallen behind his desk. They were copies of contracts, but with different amounts than what I'd seen in the official reports on the secretary's desk. Richard felt he was onto something important. Do you still have those papers? No, sir. At the time I gave them back to him, thinking they'd fallen by accident, but I remember the numbers were very different. Dorothy, you know the company well. Where are the old documents kept? There's a records room in the basement, sir. That's where all the old contracts are kept. Reports from previous years, things like that, but it's usually locked. Richard began formulating a plan in his mind. If he could prove Michael was involved in shady dealings, maybe he could also expose the lies he was spreading. Dorothy, would you help me look into this? Sir, I'm afraid of losing my job. I support 3 grandchildren on my own. I can't afford to be unemployed. Richard noticed the genuine worry in her voice. What do you mean, 3 grandchildren? Dorothy sighed, as if carrying a heavy weight on her shoulders. My daughter passed away 2 years ago, sir. She left behind 3 children. Jason, who's 15, Sarah, 12, and little Tyler, just 8. They live with me and depend on my salary. Richard felt a pang in his chest. He knew the pain of losing someone dear all too well. Dorothy, I promise you won't lose your job. In fact, if you help me uncover the truth, I guarantee your situation will improve. You're sure about that? Absolutely. I'm not the man Michael is making me out to be. I came to the United States with plans for growth, not destruction. Dorothy studied him for a few seconds, as if weighing whether she could trust him. All right, sir, I'll help. But we have to be careful. Michael still has friends here. What kind of friends? The night janitor, Stanley, has always been close to him. And the cleaning supervisor, Brenda, too. Sometimes I see them whispering in corners. Richard mentally noted those names. Is there anyone we can trust? The daytime doorman, Walter, is a very honest man. He's worked here 20 years and knows everything that goes on in this company. If anyone can help us, it's him. Perfect. Tomorrow I'll try to talk to him. Sir, let me make a suggestion. It'd be better if I spoke to him first. Walter was nervous when he heard a new foreign owner had taken over. If I explain things, he might be more open. Richard agreed with Dorothy's strategy. And about the records room, how do we get in? I have a copy of the keys, sir. Sometimes I have to clean down there too, but I usually only go once a month. When's the next time? Next week, but I can go sooner if needed. For the first time in days, Richard felt a flicker of hope. "Dorothy, I don't know how to thank you for your help." "No need to thank me, sir. I just want the company to keep running well so we can all keep our jobs." In the days that followed, Richard tried to maintain his normal routine, but now he understood why employees eyed him with suspicion. It hurt knowing his reputation was being destroyed by lies, but at least he wasn't fighting alone anymore. Dorothy kept her promise and spoke to Walter, the doorman. To their surprise, the 60-year-old man not only confirmed their suspicions about Michael, but revealed even more troubling information. "Mrs. Williams," Walter said in a hushed conversation, "I've always had my doubts about Mr. Jenkins. He had some very strange visitors after hours." "What kind of visitors?" "Businessmen from other companies, sometimes even competitors. They'd meet in his office when no one else was in the building." "And you think this has to do with the irregularities?" "I do. Once I overheard a conversation by chance. They were talking about diverting contracts to other companies in exchange for a cut." Dorothy's heart raced. If this was true, Michael wasn't just spreading lies about Richard. He'd been stealing from the company. "Walter, do you have any proof?" "Not exactly proof, but I have something that might interest the new boss." Walter looked around, making sure they were alone. "I've always had the habit of writing down the license plates of visitors, you know. It's a quirk of mine for security purposes. I have a little notebook with all the visits from the last 5 years." "And were any of these visits suspicious?" "Yes, they were, especially in the last 2 years. Dr. Michael would receive the same group of people every week, always at the same time, always in meetings that lasted for hours." Dorothy realized they had found a valuable lead. "Could you show this notebook to the new boss?" Walter hesitated. "Mrs. Dorothy, I'm afraid of getting into trouble. If Dr. Michael finds out I have these notes..." "Mr. Walter, Dr. Michael doesn't work here anymore, and the new boss isn't the bad man people are talking about. I've spoken with him. He's a good person." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. He only wants what's best for the company and all of us." Walter thought for a moment before answering. "All right, but I want to speak with him personally before handing anything over." That night, Dorothy arranged a discreet meeting between Richard and Walter at the reception desk after all the employees had left. Richard was impressed by the amount of information the doorman had collected over the years. "Dr. Richard," said Walter, showing his notebook, "I always knew something was wrong here, but I'm just a doorman. Who would believe me?" Richard flipped through the notebook's pages, seeing dates, times, license plates, and even the names of some of the people who visited Michael. "Walter, this is very valuable. Can you explain what you observed in more detail?" "Well, Doctor, I've worked here for 20 years. I know the employees, I know who the regular suppliers are. I understand the rhythm of the company. But with Dr. Michael, there were always these strange meetings." "Strange how?" "People who had nothing to do with our tech business. Construction contractors, transport businessmen, people who shouldn't even have an interest in our company." Richard began connecting the dots. "And how often did these meetings happen?" "At least twice a week for the last 2 years. And always very discreet, you know. Dr. Michael asked me not to log these visits in the official book." "He asked you directly?" "Yes, sir. He said they were confidential business meetings, and it was better to keep them quiet. At the time, I didn't question it, but I always thought it was odd." Dorothy, who had been listening, spoke up. "Mr. Walter, do you remember any of these people specifically?" "Yes, I do. There was a man named Bradley Scott, who always came in a silver Cadillac, and a blonde woman, Courtney something, who always arrived in a black Lexus." Richard wrote down the names. "And do you think I might find something concrete in the archives?" "Perhaps, sir," Dorothy replied. "If Dr. Michael was really diverting contracts, there must be documents stored somewhere." "When can we check?" "Tomorrow night, if you'd like. I have the keys, and I know the archives well." Richard agreed, feeling he was finally on the right path to uncovering the truth and clearing his name. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The following night, Richard, Dorothy, and Walter met in the building's basement. The archives were a large space with tall shelves full of document boxes organized by year and department. Dorothy knew the system well and quickly located the boxes from the period when Michael had worked as director. "Where do we start?" Richard asked. "Let's look through the contracts from the last 2 years first," Dorothy suggested. "If there was anything irregular, it would be from that time." They began examining the documents methodically. Richard was responsible for analyzing the main contracts, while Dorothy and Walter searched for loose correspondence and documents that might have been filed incorrectly. After 2 hours of searching, Walter made an important discovery. "Dr. Thompson, look at this." He had found a folder hidden behind other boxes, as if someone had deliberately tried to conceal it. Richard took the folder and began examining its contents. His eyes widened when he saw what was inside. "I can't believe this," he murmured. "What is it, sir?" Dorothy asked. "These are copies of contracts, with amounts completely different from the official ones. And look, some of these contracts are with the same companies Walter saw in his notebook." Richard showed them the documents. It was clear that Michael had set up a scheme where he negotiated inflated contracts, pocketing the difference. "And there's more," Richard continued. "Here are printed email exchanges showing he was offering the company's confidential information to competitors." "Does that mean he was selling company secrets?" Walter asked. "Exactly. And look at the date on this email. 3 days before I signed the purchase agreement. He was trying to sabotage the deal from the start." Dorothy shook her head in disbelief. "What a dishonest person. And on top of that, he's spreading lies about you to the staff." Richard kept examining the documents and found something even more disturbing. "Everyone, look at this." Michael wasn't working alone. He showed a list of employees' names who were apparently involved in the scheme. Stanley, the night janitor, was receiving a monthly payment to provide after-hours access to the building. Richard read. Brenda, the cleaning supervisor, altered maintenance reports to hide unauthorized meetings. Dorothy was shocked to see her supervisor's name on the list. "Brenda, I can't believe it. She was always so strict about procedures." "Unfortunately, it seems she was being paid to look the other way in certain situations," Richard said. Walter pointed to another document. "And look here, Doctor. There are even names of some finance department employees who helped cover up the numbers." Richard felt both relieved and outraged. On one hand, he finally had concrete proof that Michael was dishonest. On the other, he discovered the corruption was more widespread than he'd imagined. "Everyone, with this evidence, I can not only expose Michael, but also clear my name with the staff." "What will you do now?" Dorothy asked. "First, I'll organize everything and make backup copies. Then I'll call a meeting with all employees to explain the truth." "And what about those involved in the scheme?" Richard thought for a moment. "I'll give them a chance to explain themselves. Depending on their level of involvement, some may be forgiven if they help repair the damage." As they were putting the documents away, they heard footsteps in the basement hallway. The three exchanged worried glances. "Who could it be at this hour?" Dorothy whispered. Walter moved closer to the door to listen. "Sounds like Stanley," he murmured. "And he's coming this way." Richard quickly stashed the most important documents in a folder he'd brought and signaled for everyone to stay quiet. The footsteps stopped right outside the records room door. They heard the jingle of keys and realized someone was trying to open the door. "What do we do?" Dorothy whispered. Richard motioned for them to hide behind the tallest shelves. Stanley entered the room and turned on the light, starting to search for something specific. From their hiding spot, they could see the janitor heading straight for the area where they had found Michael's folder. When he realized the folder was no longer there, he began frantically searching through other boxes. "Where is it? Where did it go?" Stanley muttered, visibly nervous. That's when Richard noticed Stanley wasn't alone. He was talking to someone on his phone. "Michael, man, something's wrong here. The folder you asked me to get isn't in the spot anymore." Richard, Dorothy, and Walter exchanged glances. Michael was still coordinating actions within the company, even after his dismissal. "What do you mean you don't know where it is?" Stanley continued. "You told me it was hidden behind the 2018 boxes. I've looked everywhere and it's gone." There was a pause as Stanley listened to Michael's response. "Fine. I'll check the other files. but if someone found something, it's not my fault. Stanley hung up and kept searching for a few more minutes before giving up and leaving the archive. Once they were sure he was gone, the three stepped out of hiding. "Now I understand why Michael was so confident spreading lies about me," Richard said. "He still has people working for him here." "What do we do?" Dorothy asked. "If they suspect someone found the documents, they might try something more drastic." Richard thought quickly. "We need to act before they have time to regroup. I'll call a company-wide meeting for tomorrow." "Do you think that's wise?" Walter questioned. "If they feel cornered, we have no choice. The longer we wait, the more they'll try to cover their tracks." The next morning, Richard asked his secretary to gather all employees for an urgent meeting in the company auditorium. The news spread fast, and many workers began speculating they'd finally get confirmation of the mass layoffs Michael had predicted. When Richard took the stage, the room was tense. He scanned the crowd and saw worried faces, people whispering among themselves, and a few employees he knew were involved in Michael's scheme trying to stay composed. Richard began speaking in English, but his nerves made him stumble over his words a few times. He noticed the audience losing focus, some growing impatient. That's when Dorothy, standing at the back of the auditorium, approached the stage. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked quietly. Richard looked at her gratefully. "Please, yes." Dorothy took the microphone and addressed the employees. "Everyone, I know you're worried and eager to hear what Dr. Thompson has to say. He's nervous because English isn't his first language, but I'll help translate his words and, most importantly, his intentions." The crowd settled slightly, curious about why the cleaning lady was involved. Richard spoke again, this time alternating between English and German, with Dorothy helping translate and explain the more complex points. "First, I want you all to know I didn't come to the United States to fire anyone," Richard said. "On the contrary, my plans are to expand the company and create new job opportunities." A murmur rippled through the auditorium. Some employees exchanged surprised glances. "Then why were we told there would be cuts?" someone called out. Richard took a deep breath and decided to reveal the whole truth. "Because Dr. Michael Jenkins, the former director, has been spreading lies about me and my plans, and I've discovered he did it to cover up his own misconduct." The room fell completely silent. Richard opened the folder containing the documents he had found and began displaying the evidence on the screen. "These are copies of fake contracts that Dr. Michael created to divert money from the company. Here we have correspondence showing he sold confidential information to competitors, and this is a list of people he paid to facilitate his illegal activities." As Richard presented each document, the employees' expressions shifted from suspicion to shock and, in some cases, outrage. Stanley, the night janitor, tried to discreetly stand up to leave the auditorium, but Walter, who was positioned near the door, blocked his exit. "Mr. Stanley, I think it's best if you stay and hear everything out," Walter said firmly. Brenda, the cleaning supervisor, looked visibly pale and avoided everyone's gaze. Richard continued his presentation, explaining in detail how Michael had set up the corruption scheme and how he was using the rumors about layoffs to distract from his own crimes. "Now I understand why you were all afraid of me," Richard said. "Michael knew that if you really got to know me, you'd realize he was lying. That's why he spread all that misinformation." An employee raised her hand. "Dr. Richard, how can we be sure these documents are real?" Richard had expected this question. "That's a fair question. Dorothy, could you please call Dr. Anderson?" Dorothy signaled to the back of the auditorium, and a middle-aged man entered carrying a briefcase. "Everyone, this is Dr. Anderson, an independent accountant I hired to conduct a full audit of the company's books. He can confirm the authenticity of these documents and explain the financial impact of Michael's scheme." Dr. Anderson stepped up to the microphone. "Good morning, everyone. After 3 days of analyzing these documents and comparing them with the company's official records, I can confirm there have been systematic diversions of funds over the last 2 years. The total losses caused by this scheme amount to approximately $2 million. A murmur of outrage spread through the room. "But there's good news," the accountant continued. "With the evidence we've uncovered, we'll be able to recover most of these funds through legal action against those responsible." Richard took the microphone again. Now you understand why I was being sabotaged from day one. Michael knew that if I had the chance to implement my real plans, his lies wouldn't hold up. Stanley finally spoke up, visibly nervous. Dr. Richard, I can explain my part in all this. Go ahead, Stanley. Dr. Michael told me the after-hours meetings were for legitimate company business. He paid me extra to open the building, but I swear I didn't know it was for anything illegal. Richard studied the janitor's face, weighing his sincerity. Stanley, do you have a family? Yes, sir. A wife and 2 young kids. And you need this job? Desperately, sir. It's my only income. Richard exchanged a glance with Dorothy, who gave a subtle nod, as if recommending mercy. Stanley, I'll give you a chance. But from now on, any suspicious activity must be reported directly to me. Understood? Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Brenda, the cleaning supervisor, also spoke up. Dr. Richard, I'd like to say something too. Of course, Brenda. I admit I took money from Dr. Michael, but he told me it was to keep quiet about important business meetings. I never imagined it was illegal. Brenda, is there anything else you can add to help us understand the scheme better? Brenda hesitated for a moment. Yes, sir. Dr. Michael kept some documents in a small safe in his office. When he was fired, he came back one night to pick something up. I saw him leaving with a briefcase. Richard was interested in the information. Do you know what was in that briefcase? I'm not sure, but it looked heavy. And he seemed very nervous, looking around all the time. Do you remember when this happened? It was 3 days after he was fired, a Friday night. Richard made a few mental notes. Michael had taken company documents after his dismissal, which could be considered a crime. Brenda, just like Stanley, I'm going to give you a chance, but I expect total transparency from now on. You can count on me, Doctor. Richard addressed the entire audience again. Folks, I know you've spent weeks worried and anxious because of the lies that were spread. I apologize for not uncovering this sooner, but now that the truth is out, I can share my real plans for the company with you. He pulled up a new presentation on the screen. Over the next 6 months, we'll invest $3 million in technological upgrades. That means new equipment, new software, and most importantly, new jobs. The atmosphere in the room began to shift. Expressions of worry gave way to curiosity, and in some cases, hope. We'll create 15 new positions across different departments. 5 for developers, 3 for systems analysts, 4 for technical support, 2 for digital marketing, and 1 for project management. Spontaneous applause broke out in the audience. Additionally, all current employees will receive training to adapt to the new technologies. No one will be left behind. One employee raised her hand. Dr. Thompson, how can we be sure you won't change your mind later? Richard smiled for the first time since arriving in the United States. That's a very smart question. To ensure full transparency, I'll create an employee committee with direct access to all major company decisions. Dorothy Williams will lead this committee. Everyone turned to look at Dorothy, who seemed visibly surprised. Me, sir? Yes, Dorothy. You've been with the company for 15 years. You're trusted by your colleagues, and you've proven yourself to be honest and courageous. What's more, I'm creating a new position for you, Manager of Transparency and Compliance. The room erupted in applause. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. Sir, I don't know if I'm qualified for such an important role. Dorothy, you have something no degree can teach, character, and that's far more valuable than any diploma. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just getting started. Now, back to the story. After the meeting, Richard felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. For the first time since arriving in the United States, employees approached him with genuine smiles, asking about the new projects and offering to help implement the changes. But the real transformation in Richard's life was yet to come. That afternoon, Dorothy went to his office to thank him for the promotion and discuss the details of her new role. Dr. Thompson, I still can't believe what happened today. Ever since I started working here, I've dreamed of having a chance to grow professionally. Dorothy, you deserve much more than this. In fact, there's something personal I'd like to share with you if you don't mind. Of course, sir. Richard opened his desk drawer and took out the old photograph he often looked at during lonely nights. "This is my daughter, Jennifer. She married an American and moved here to the United States a few years ago." Dorothy studied the photo carefully. "She's very beautiful, sir. Where does she live?" Richard sighed deeply. "She doesn't live anywhere anymore, Dorothy. Jennifer passed away 2 years ago, the victim of a car accident here in New York City." "Oh my goodness, sir. I'm so sorry." "The worst part is she left behind a little girl, my granddaughter Emma. But after the accident, my son-in-law's family completely cut ties. They moved away, and I've had no contact since." Dorothy was visibly moved by the story. "You don't know where they are? Not a clue. I tried hiring private investigators in Germany, but tracking someone in another country is nearly impossible. That's why I agreed to run the American branch. I hoped being here might help me find some lead on Emma's whereabouts." "What does she look like? How old is she?" "She's 8 now. Brown hair like her mother's, light eyes like mine. The last time I saw her, she was only 5. Dorothy grew thoughtful for a moment. "Sir, may I see the photo up close?" Richard handed her the photograph. Dorothy studied it carefully, taking in every detail. "Dr. Richard, this girl, she looks an awful lot like a child I know." Richard's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "There's a girl at my grandchildren's school who matches that description. Brown hair, light eyes, about the same age. And her name is also Emma." Richard stood up abruptly. "Dorothy, are you sure?" "I can't say for certain just from the photo, but the resemblance is striking. And there's one more thing. This girl sometimes says a few words in German. The other kids always find it funny." Richard paced the room, trying to steady his emotions. "Where is this school?" "It's Washington Elementary School in Greenwich Village. My grandchildren have gone there for 3 years. Dorothy, could you take me there tomorrow?" "Of course, sir, but you should prepare yourself in case it's not her." "I know. But after 2 years of searching, any possibility gives me hope." The next morning, Richard barely slept. He arrived at work earlier than usual and anxiously waited for the time to go to the school with Dorothy. When they finally reached Washington Elementary School, Richard felt a mix of nerves and anticipation like never before. Dorothy led him to the office and explained the situation to the principal, leaving out some details to avoid raising false hopes. "The Emma you're looking for must be Emma Miller," said the principal. "She's been here for 2 years, now in 3rd grade. "Miller?" asked Richard. "Yes, she lives with her paternal grandfather, Mr. Robert Miller, and her grandmother, Mrs. Patricia." Richard remembered that was indeed his son-in-law's last name. "Can I see her?" The principal hesitated. "Well, this is a bit delicate. Mr. Miller has always been very protective of Emma. He's made it clear she shouldn't have contact with strangers." "I understand his concern," said Richard, "but if she really is my granddaughter, I have a right to see her." "Can you prove you're her grandfather?" Richard showed documents proving his relation to Jennifer, along with records confirming her marriage to his son-in-law. The principal examined them carefully. "It all seems legitimate, but I'd need to speak with Emma's current guardians before allowing any meeting." "Of course, I understand. Can you reach out to them?" "I'll try calling Mr. Robert now." The principal dialed the number and waited. After a few rings, someone answered. "Mr. Robert, this is the principal at Emma's school. Sir, there's someone here claiming to be the girl's maternal grandfather." "What?" "No, maternal grandfather. He has documents and everything." "Yes, sir, I understand your concern. No, he seems like a respectable person." "All right. Can you come here to speak with him?" The principal hung up the phone. "He'll be here in an hour. Said he needs to see the documents in person and speak with you before making any decision." Richard agreed to wait. That hour felt like the longest of his life. When Robert Miller arrived at Washington Elementary School, Richard was surprised to see a man who looked younger than he expected, probably in his 50s. He had a wary, protective expression. "You're the one claiming to be Jennifer's father?" Robert asked without preamble. "Yes, I'm Richard Thompson. Jennifer was my only daughter." Robert looked Richard up and down as if assessing his sincerity. Why didn't you come forward before? It's been 2 years since Jennifer passed. Richard took a deep breath before answering. Robert, after the accident, I tried reaching out to you multiple times. I called, sent letters, even tried going to the apartment where you lived, but I never got a response. That's because we moved right after the accident. It was very hard for all of us. I can imagine. But why did you move without leaving a forwarding address? Robert lowered his head as if ashamed. Look, Mr. Thompson, I'll be honest with you. We were afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid you'd come and try to take Emma away. She's all we have left of our son. Richard felt his heart clench as he understood the family's dilemma. Robert, I completely understand how you felt, but Emma is also all I have left of my daughter. The two men looked at each other in silence for a moment, each recognizing the other's pain. Do you really want to meet Emma? Robert asked. It's all I want in this world. And then what? Will you try to take her away? Richard thought carefully before answering. Robert, Emma is 8 years old. She needs stability, love, a family that cares for her. Have you given her that these past 2 years? We have. She's our little princess. Then why would I want to take her away from where she's happy? I just want the chance to know my granddaughter, and if possible, be part of her life. Robert seemed to relax slightly. Patricia always said it wasn't right to keep Emma from you. She said a child should know all her family. Your wife is right. All right. I'll let you meet Emma, but on one condition. She can't know who you are at first. I want to see how she reacts naturally. Richard agreed. The principal went to fetch Emma from her classroom, saying only that there were some people who wanted to meet her. When the girl appeared at the office door, Richard felt as if time had stopped. Emma was the spitting image of Jennifer at that age, wavy brown hair, bright blue eyes, and a shy but sweet smile. Hi, Grandpa Robert, Emma said, walking up to her paternal grandfather. Hi, Princess. This is Mrs. Dorothy, who works with children, and this is Mr. Richard, who also loves kids very much. Emma looked at Richard curiously. Where are you from, Mr. Richard? Your name is different. Richard knelt to her level. I'm from Germany, Emma. It's a country far from here. Germany. Her eyes lit up. My mom always talked about Germany. She said it was a really beautiful place. Richard felt his eyes welling with tears. Your mom knew Germany well? She did. She even taught me some words. Want to hear? Emma began reciting basic German phrases with surprisingly good pronunciation. Guten Tag. Wie geht es dir? Ich liebe dich. Richard couldn't hold back his emotion hearing his granddaughter speak German. Very good, Emma. Your pronunciation is perfect. Really? Mom always said I sounded just like Grandpa Richard. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma had casually mentioned Grandpa Richard, unaware she was speaking to him at that very moment. Robert looked at Richard in surprise. Jennifer talked about you to Emma. Apparently so, murmured Richard, still in shock. Emma kept chatting happily, oblivious to the tension in the air. Mommy always said I'd meet Grandpa Richard one day and that he'd teach me so much about Germany. She said he was a very kind person who loved me very much, even though he lived far away. Richard could no longer hold back. Tears began streaming down his face. Emma noticed he was crying and approached him with concern. Why are you sad, Mr. Richard? Richard looked at Robert, silently asking for permission. Robert nodded. Emma, would you like to know a secret? Yes. I'm the Grandpa Richard your mommy always talked about. Emma stood still for a few seconds, processing the information. Then her eyes widened. You're my real grandpa? Yes, my princess. Emma rushed into Richard's arms, and he held her as if he'd never let go. Grandpa Richard, I knew you'd come one day. Mummy always said you would. Richard wept with emotion as he embraced the granddaughter he'd searched for so long. I'm sorry it took me so long to find you, Emma. It's okay, Grandpa. You're here now. Robert was also moved by the reunion. Emma, how about we invite Grandpa Richard to dinner at our house tonight? That way you can meet Grandma Patricia too. Can we, Grandpa Robert? Really? Of course, Princess. Emma turned to Richard. Will you have dinner with us, Grandpa Richard? It would be an honor, Emma. That evening, Richard met Patricia, who welcomed him with tears in her eyes and many apologies for hiding for so long. During dinner, Emma kept asking questions about Germany, Richard's life, and the stories Jennifer used to tell about him. Grandpa Richard, do you know why Mommy always said I got my eyes from you? Richard smiled. Because it's true, Princess. You have the exact same eyes I had at your age. And can you teach me real German? Of course. In fact, how about I teach you not just German, but also about German culture, food, everything? Emma clapped her hands with joy. Robert spoke up. Richard, Patricia and I were talking and we'd like to make you an offer. What kind of offer? How about you come over for dinner every week? Emma could spend some weekends with you and you two could build a real grandfather-granddaughter relationship. Richard was moved by the family's generosity. You'd really do that? Of course, Patricia replied. Emma should know her maternal roots, and after seeing how you connected today, it would be selfish of us to stand in the way. Besides, Robert added, Emma always asked about you. Now she can have the answers she's wanted. Richard looked at Emma, who was grinning from ear to ear. Then it's settled. Every week we'll meet, and I'll teach you all about our German ancestors. And about Mommy too, especially about Mommy. In the following months, Richard's life changed completely. At work, the new projects were succeeding, the employees were motivated and productive, and Dorothy was excelling in her new role. Richard had hired a private tutor to improve his English, driven by his desire to communicate perfectly with his granddaughter. Their conversations grew smoother and deeper. Emma, in turn, was learning German quickly and loved hearing Richard's stories about Jennifer as a child. Grandpa Richard, tell me again that story about Mom and the little dog in Germany. Oh, you want to hear about Buddy? I do. Richard smiled every time he saw his granddaughter's excitement. Well, your mom was 7 years old when we found a lost puppy in the park near our house. She begged us to keep him, promising she'd take care of everything. And you kept him. We sure did. And you know what? Your mom really took care of Buddy just like she promised. She was a very responsible little girl. Just like me. Exactly like you. During these conversations, Richard noticed how much Emma had inherited not just Christina's physical traits, but also her curious and caring personality. Dorothy had also become an important figure in Richard's life. Besides excelling in her new role at work, she had become a loyal friend and confidant during moments when he missed Germany or his daughter. Mr. Richard, can I ask you a personal question? Dorothy said during one of their late-night talks at the office. Of course, Dorothy. Do you still want to go back to Germany? Richard thought for a moment. You know, Dorothy, when I first got here, my plan was only to stay long enough to find Emma and then take her back with me to Germany. And now? Now I realize her place is here, with the family who loves and cared for her when I couldn't. And my place is wherever she is. So, you're staying in the United States? I am. In fact, I'm thinking about becoming an American citizen. Dorothy smiled. I think that's a great decision. You already speak English almost perfectly, you know our culture, and you have family here. That's true. And besides, I have a company to run and employees who depend on me. And you have a friend who'd be very sad if you left, Dorothy added with a smile. That friend is very important to me too, Dorothy. The company continued to grow under Richard's leadership. The new tech projects were a success, and the firm became a benchmark in the American market. Dorothy excelled so much in her new role that Richard decided to send her for a business management course. Dorothy, I have a proposal for you. What kind of proposal, Mr. Richard? How about getting a business degree? The company will cover all the costs, and you can study whenever it's most convenient for you. Dorothy was speechless. Sir, I'm 50 years old. Isn't it a little late to start college? Dorothy, it's never too late to learn, and you've proven you're capable of much more than you think. But what about my grandchildren? I need to take care of them. We'll arrange everything so you can balance your studies with your family responsibilities. How does that sound? Dorothy accepted the offer and began her college studies. Her grandchildren were so proud to see their grandma back in school, and it motivated them to work even harder in their own classes. Emma also started visiting the company occasionally on weekends when she stayed with Richard. She loved seeing her grandpa's workplace and making friends with the employees. "Grandpa Richard, why does everyone like you so much here at the company?" "I don't know if everyone likes me, Emma, but I try to treat everyone with respect and honesty. Mrs. Dorothy told me that before you came, people were sad and worried. That's true, but sometimes people worry when they don't understand what's happening. And now they understand? Now they do. And when people understand each other, it's easier to work together." A year after Richard arrived in the United States, the company threw a big party to celebrate the exceptional results they'd achieved. All the employees were there, along with their families. Richard was asked to give a speech, and this time he felt completely confident speaking in English. "Everyone, a year ago I arrived here not knowing how to speak English properly, and you were all very afraid of me," began Richard, drawing laughter from the audience. "Today I can say that not only have I learned English, but I've also learned so much about the United States, about all of you, and most importantly, about myself. When I bought this company, my main motivation was to find my granddaughter. But you've given me so much more than that. You've given me a new family, a new home, and a new life." Richard looked at Dorothy, who was in the front row with her grandchildren, and at Emma, who stood beside Robert and Patricia. "I want to especially thank one person who taught me that truly understanding someone isn't just about speaking the same language. It's about having an open heart and the willingness to listen." Everyone turned to look at Dorothy, who was visibly moved. "Dorothy, you didn't just help me communicate with the employees, you helped me communicate with myself. Thank you for having the courage to approach a lost and frightened foreigner." The audience applauded enthusiastically. Richard continued his speech, talking about the company's future plans, the new projects being developed, and how proud he was to be part of the team. "To close, I want to say that when I first arrived here, I was a German businessman nobody understood. Today I'm an American at heart who understands that a company's success isn't measured just by numbers, but by the happiness of the people who are part of it." The room erupted in applause. Emma rushed to the stage and hugged her grandfather, followed by Dorothy and the other employees. That night, as Richard tucked Emma into bed in the room he had specially prepared for her in his apartment, she asked a question that touched him deeply. "Grandpa Richard, do you think Mommy is happy that we found each other?" Richard pulled up the blanket and kissed his granddaughter's forehead. "I'm sure she is, sweetheart. Your mother always wanted us to be a family. And now we are, right? Now we are. A big, happy family. With Grandpa Robert and Grandma Patricia too. Them too. And with Mrs. Dorothy and her grandchildren. Family isn't just about blood, Emma. Family is about who loves and cares for you." Emma smiled and closed her eyes, content with the answer. Richard stayed for a few minutes, watching his granddaughter sleep, thinking about how his life had completely changed since arriving in the United States. The next day, Richard received a call from headquarters in Germany. The company's president wanted to congratulate him on the outstanding results of the American branch. "Richard, the numbers you've achieved are impressive. How did you manage such a quick turnaround?" "Well, Mr. Wilson, the key was understanding that a company is made of people, and people only work well when they feel valued and understood. You seem to have learned a lot about management in the US. I've learned a lot about life, actually. We're considering applying some of your methods to our other branches. Could you come to Germany to present your results to the board?" Richard hesitated for a few seconds. "Could I present via video conference? I'd prefer not to leave the US right now." "Of course, that's fine. But tell me, Richard, are you really happy there? I thought you were only staying temporarily." "Mr. Wilson, I've found more here than I ever expected. It's not just a job, it's a new life." "I see. Well, keep up the excellent work." After hanging up, Richard reflected on how much he had changed. A year ago, he would have immediately accepted the opportunity to return to Germany to present his results. Now, his priority was staying close to the people he loved. Dorothy knocked on his office door. Dr. Richard, may I speak with you? Of course, Dorothy, come in. I wanted to thank you again for the opportunity to go to college. I got my first semester grades and passed all my classes with high marks. Congratulations, Dorothy. I knew you'd do very well. And there's something I'd like to propose to you. What is it? How about we create a continuing education program for all the employees? It doesn't have to be college for everyone, but technical courses, languages, computer skills. Richard smiled. Dorothy was always thinking of ways to improve not just her own life, but the lives of everyone around her. That's an excellent idea, Dorothy. Let's develop this project together. And there's one more thing, Dr. Richard. Go ahead. My grandchildren want to learn German too. Do you think you could give them some lessons along with Emma? It would be my pleasure, Dorothy. We can hold the classes here at the company on Saturday mornings. The kids will be so happy. A few months later, Richard had formed a small German study group that included not just Emma and Dorothy's grandchildren, but also some employees who were interested in the language. The Saturday classes became a highly anticipated weekly event. Richard taught not just the language, but also German culture, geography, history, and always included stories about his life in Germany and about Jennifer. Professor Richard, said Jason, Dorothy's oldest grandson, can you tell us what snow is like in Germany? Ah, you want to know about German winters? All the children nodded. Well, in Germany, when winter comes, everything is covered in white snow. It's like the whole world turns into a fairy tale book. Emma raised her hand. Grandpa Richard, did Mommy like the snow? She loved it, Emma. Your mom always said the snow made her feel like she was in a magical story. Then why did she come live in the US if she loved the snow so much? Richard smiled warmly. Because your mom discovered that love is warmer than any winter, Princess. The children always smiled when Richard told these stories, and he realized he was passing along not just knowledge, but also precious values and memories. 2 years after his arrival in the US, Richard decided to surprise everyone. He organized a special party to celebrate not just the company's results, but also to make an important announcement. Everyone, you know that 2 years ago I arrived here as a lost foreigner who could barely communicate. Laughter from the crowd. Today, I want to announce that I've officially become a US citizen. The party erupted in applause and cheers. Emma ran to hug her grandfather. Now you're a real American, Grandpa Richard. Now I am Princess. Dorothy approached with tears in her eyes. Dr. Richard, you don't know how happy this makes me. Dorothy, you and all of you are my American family. I couldn't be anywhere else. Robert and Patricia were also at the party and came over to congratulate Richard. Richard, when we first met, I was afraid you'd take Emma away, said Robert. Today, I know you've brought so much more to our family than you took. Robert, you gave me the chance to know my granddaughter and be part of her life. I'm the one who should be thankful. Now we're all one big blended family, said Patricia, German, American, and full of love. Richard looked around the party and saw Dorothy dancing with her grandchildren, Emma playing with the other kids, the company employees celebrating like one big family, and he felt he had finally found his place in the world. That night, as he was putting Emma to bed, she asked one of her deep questions. Grandpa Richard, do you ever regret coming to the US? Never, Emma. Why? Because sometimes I think if you hadn't come, you wouldn't have gone through all those hard times at the beginning. Richard sat on the edge of the bed and took his granddaughter's hand. Emma, you know what I learned? The best things in life sometimes come after the greatest hardships. What do you mean? If I hadn't gone through all those difficulties at the company, I would never have met Mrs. Dorothy. If I hadn't met Mrs. Dorothy, maybe I would never have found you. That's true. And if I hadn't found you, I would never have discovered I could be happy in the United States. Emma smiled. So it was good that you went through those hardships? Yes, it was. Because they brought me to you, to our family, to our new life. I love you, Grandpa Richard. I love you too, sweetheart. 3 years after his arrival in the United States, Richard was in his office when he received an unexpected visitor. It was Michael Jenkins, the former director who had caused so many problems. Richard, can I talk to you? Richard was surprised but decided to hear what Michael had to say. "Michael, what do you want?" "I came to apologize." Richard studied the man's face. Michael looked thinner, older, and definitely more humble than when they'd first met years ago. "Apologize for what exactly?" "For everything. For the lies I spread about you, for the scheme I set up to steal from the company, for trying to sabotage your work." Richard leaned back in his chair. "And what made you change your mind?" "Life, Richard. After I was fired, I couldn't get a job anywhere. Word of what I did spread in the industry, and no one wants to hire someone dishonest. And I lost my home. My family left me, and I finally realized everything I did was out of greed and wounded pride." Richard continued listening in silence. "When I heard you turned the company into the success it is today, that you promoted Dorothy, that all the employees are happy, I realized the kind of person you really are. Michael, I appreciate your apology, but I can't just forget what you did. I know. I'm not asking you to forgive me or give me another chance. I just wanted you to know I recognize my mistakes." Richard thought for a moment. "Michael, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If you could go back in time, would you do things differently?" "I'd do everything differently, Richard. I would have welcomed you with open arms, helped with the transition, been honest from the start." Richard stood up. "Michael, you made serious mistakes, but everyone deserves a second chance." "What are you saying?" "I'm expanding to other cities. I need managers for the new branches. I can't offer you a director position, but I can give you a chance to start over as a coordinator if you're willing to prove you've changed." Michael was speechless. "Richard, you'd really do that after everything I did?" "Michael, a very wise person once taught me that understanding goes far beyond speaking the same language. You have to listen with your heart and see beyond appearances." "Who taught you that?" Richard smiled. "A janitor who became my most loyal friend and is now one of the best executives I know." The end. So, what did you think of this touching story? Richard discovered that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can completely change our lives. Dorothy proved that courage and honesty are worth more than any degree. And Emma gained not just a grandfather, but a much bigger family than she ever imagined. Let us know in the comments which part moved you the most and where you're watching from. Do you think Richard made the right decision, giving Michael a second chance? Share your thoughts with us. Thank you so much for joining us.